Hey everybody, this is Douglas, or Doug, or however I am going to be identified in the future. I'm not sure. Um, this is my first official video after making the video sharing what the purpose of this channel is. And I was trying to think of topics and ideas of what to do for this first video, because I want every video to be meaningful, have something substantial, and we'll say, yeah, something of substance to offer to the viewer, listener, whatever. But at the same time, I want it to be some regular occurring thing, so I want to get ahead of the situation and not procrastinate, as I mentioned I have a tendency to do. So I want this to be a habitual thing. But anyways, long story short, in my travels of the interwebs today on social media, I was given the topic that I am going to talk about today. And the topic I wanted to discuss today is prejudice and racism. For obvious reasons. Well, actually, depending on when you're watching this, but today is June 12th. I almost said 1920, but 2020. And if you're aware of current events, there is riots in the street, civil unrest, protests, etc., etc., all in regard to prejudice. So, we often hear the term racism thrown around, but it's not usually defined, and it's usually brought up as an accusation, and it's usually met with either resistance or agreement. So let's start by defining racism and prejudice. Racism, basically, in short, is believing one race or another is superior or inferior to another. And there's varying degrees of racism, as we will go over shortly. Prejudice, we could break it down into its basic parts of pre and judge. That's all it really is. It's to form an opinion. And now we're not talking about every definition of prejudice or racism, but it's to form an opinion prior to having, we'll say, full knowledge or accurate knowledge or basis to form that opinion. So that's all they really are. And my argument, or my claim, I guess, I'll make in the very beginning of the video, and I guess proceed to substantiate that claim. And whether you accept or deny it is irrelevant, as long as you understand it. But I wager we are all, now this is adults, in this world, prejudiced and racist. So when we hear the term racist specifically, we associate that with a negative, malicious mentality. But in actuality, if you again go back to the definition of feeling one race, which is another topic for another day, what race and ethnicity actually is. But anyways, feeling one race is superior or inferior to another by nature. So the first image that often comes to mind, especially in the United States, is of a white supremacist. But that is not the only example, and not every instance of racism is so overt. But we often, all right, so before I even get into proving that you are a racist, that I am a racist, the first question, or the first idea I want to present to you is, we're all born into a fully formed world. So there's many customs, there is many things going on already. And before we enter the world, there is a whole system, status quo in place. And once we're born, we learn how the system operates to a degree, and it informs how we operate. So already, you should have an understanding that it's automatic that we will pick up prejudices and biases just because we're entering a program that was already already in operation, basically. So the question to you is, what is your heritage? Are you Italian, or what is your ancestry? Are you Italian? Are you Irish? Are you Scottish? Are you British? And if you think about it, those things inform your experiences. So we'll say Italian, since that's a nice, easy one to really use as an example. You have customarily specific foods that you eat and that are associated with people of Italy. Sauces and pastas. The whole belief that Italians are expressive and express themselves with their whole body and physically with gestures to accentuate their points. All these things are passed down. So what am I saying? You learn what it means to be Italian. You learn what it means to be someone of your heritage, or what your ancestry, how it supposedly informs your characteristics, personality, etc. So you come into this world we'll say a blank slate. You actually have, well, I don't want to complicate things. So you come into this world a blank slate, relatively, and you are then proceeded to be defined by it. So prejudice and racism, by nature, or in actuality, just comes from our environment. The whole sorry. I'm trying to articulate my thoughts and share them at the same time. So I haven't gotten good at that while talking to the camera yet. But anyways, so the whole, I'm sure you've heard of the idea of nature versus nurture. Nurture is what really defines us. So racism isn't automatically a malicious thing. Like the whole idea that Italians are expressive with their hands, or what makes a sauce good. These things are by nature racist. So there is a mild and there is an extreme in the spectrum of racism. So you might think, again, we associate racism has a negative connotation. So when you hear racist, you automatically think that you're elevating your own people and at the expense of another people. Or in actuality, that might not be the case at all. For instance, there is a common belief that black males that kid better not hit my car. Anyways, there is a common belief that black males have a bigger penis. That is a racist belief. Now, we associate a big penis and we view that in a favorable way. But so you might not think to yourself automatically that that's racist. But if you actually think of the definition, oh yes. And the more you actually start to examine your belief system, you find that you have, in all likelihood, racist beliefs. The idea that black people are, by nature, better at sports, or more physically capable, or more physically fit, or stronger, faster, bigger, whatever, tougher. Do you hold that belief? Why do you hold that belief? Is every black person big and strong? No, of course not. You have the Shaquille O'Neals and you have the Cat Williams. I've encountered this in my own life, where people think that I am going to be, or alright, so I'm more fit than the average person, the average male or female. I'm more muscular and athletic. I'm more physically capable. Part of that is by nature, but part of that is deliberate. My concerted effort to actually be, fit and in shape and all that stuff. But people credit that with nature more than actual my decisions. But if you actually met my parents, my relatives, etc., you would see there is no automatic fitness in my direct bloodline. Both of my parents are obese. Many of my relatives are obese. And to assume that all of my physique is inherited is inaccurate and incorrect. So that's one example. But if you actually think about it, we have a ton of examples. So conversely, we believe Asians have small penises, or Asians are smart, or even Asians know karate. Now that's something that's kind of become a little antiquated and outdated, but these stereotypes, first off, stereotypes can be grounded in reality. So it's like they came from somewhere, but they are perpetuated and generalized and spread to apply to everyone or the average, when in actuality it doesn't describe every individual. And the problem is, humans, we like to categorize and learn patterns. So once we believe we have a pattern figured out, our brain tends to go into autopilot mode and become lazy so that we can easily categorize things instead of examining each individual case, because that's more effort and just requires more consciousness. It requires more from you. But the thing is, not all patterns and categories are based in fact. So that's when it becomes a problem, when we start to go into this autopilot mode and it's based on an erroneous belief. Then you compound that by a group of people doing that. You pass that on to your child. You pass that on to your grandchild. You pass that on to your neighbor, whatever. And then it becomes a system of thought. And it's like, now you believe Asians are alright, now you believe black people are good laborers, but they're not smart. Or they're good laborers, but that's about it. They have nothing else to offer. So it can start off as something small or harmless, quote unquote, and it can become something much more big and malevolent and insidious. That's prejudice and racism. The problem is, many of us are not self-aware. So we think that there is a pushback against this desire to progress. And this desire, the accusations of racism and bigotry and etc., is met with resistance. But it's because we don't have a full understanding of ourselves. So people will say virtue signal, or want to prove how, we'll say, virtuous and righteous they are. So they will call out something that seems off. And that is often met now with resistance, because people don't want to be accused or labeled as something that is negative or harmful or whatever. And so there's an overcorrection of people thinking nothing is actually wrong or racist or whatever unless it's overt. But the whole idea is things are not the way you imagine they will be. Things are not overt. So the whole thing that inspired this video is so the idea that African people have been oppressed in the United States is being met with resistance because there's not often overt signs to point to as oppression or unjust, unfair treatment. So people will argue that we've been freed since the 1800s, which is actually an inaccurate belief. Or segregation has ended or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you can't legislate people's thoughts. And as I pointed out earlier, things are passed down, we'll say generationally. So if you have an idea or belief of what it means to be Italian, or what are some of the characteristics of being an Asian person or a black person, then obviously other thoughts are passed down to you in both overt and covert ways, in both subtle and overt, subtle and obvious ways. So the problem is most of us are not self-aware. And we have an opinion, but it's not based on anything other than, it's not really based on anything of substance. So the way out of this is not, well, it's two things. Mainly, the key to changing and progress and of enlightenment, whatever you want to say, is truth. That is the beginning and the ending. Truth. So, and it's not about forming an opinion on whatever you find. It's just finding out exactly what is what. So if you have a belief, you try and dig it up as much as you can. Because, again, we all were born into a world that was already in progress. So, we learn to keep pace. And if you don't examine what you actually are doing, you have less autonomy. You have less consciousness of what you actually believe. So you might say, I am not a racist. But in actuality, have you actually done the work to examine if that statement is true? I am not a sexist. I am not an anything-ist. But have you actually done the work to find out if that's true? And if you find out that you are sexist, a racist, an ageist, whatever, ist, that's fine. Now, you have the choice or the decision of how you are going to proceed. You might feel white people are better than everyone. Okay. What are you going to do with that information? You might feel that you might feel however you feel. But the question then becomes, what do you do with that information? Many people feel, well, that knowledge is dangerous. But in actuality, and that secrets keep people safe. But in actuality, as long as something is true, it is not dangerous. The more knowledge that there is, and the more knowledge that we all have, the more things will progress and improve. The problem is we have opinions. Again, we form opinions without having knowledge. So we deem something good or bad before we actually understand it. The way to actually improve is to understand first and to really have no opinion. I mean, feel your feelings, but don't form any opinions. Now, obviously that is not easy, especially once we're in the habit of forming an opinion on everything. I like this, I dislike that, whatever. But really that is the goal to strive towards. So this is probably not a very clear or the best way to make the case, but the fact of the matter is, in actuality, in all likelihood, you are a racist, you are prejudiced, you are a sexist, you are whateverist, and that is okay. Now what? The highest thing that you should seek is the truth. That is the beginning. And if I can give you only one thing, that's what I'm going to give you. Seek the truth at all costs. That will be your guiding star. Well, actually, no, that's a bad analogy. That will be your Jiminy Cricket. It will be your protection. It will be your medicine. It will be your food. It will not always be easy. It will not always be pleasant. It will not always be desirable, but it will always be beneficial. The truth is always beneficial. So the people that are fighting the truth right now, or trying to fight for the status quo, all they're trying to do is preserve their convenience and their comfort. But comfort is irrelevant, and comfort doesn't automatically benefit you. You want to be, well, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, you want to be as strong and healthy as possible, and that's the purpose of this channel. We are going to become our best selves. And wherever this journey takes us, it all starts with being honest. So many times people want to be tribal, I guess you could say, and partisan. So they'll think that, oh, the Democrats are the problem, oh, the Republicans are the problem, and neither is the problem, and both are the problem. It's not, again, the beginning and the ending is truth. So self-examination. Most of us are so out of touch with our own selves, we don't know what we believe, and worse, we don't know why we believe what we believe. So you have to start doing that homework. Start doing that homework. You have to start uncovering yourself and getting familiar with yourself. And initially, you won't know what to do with the information. And that's fine. You just keep acquiring information on yourself. And the more information you gather, it will be clear what you want to do. Your path forward will become clear. So, again, the advice is to not be quick to draw a conclusion or make a decision, but the goal is to acquire knowledge, primarily of yourself. Because once you are strong enough to, we'll say, keep up with the pack, that's when you should be examining yourself of, okay, I got this belief system. Now, what actually do I want to keep? What bits are actually serving me? What bits are not serving me? And how do I want to move forward? So we'll make it light. We'll make it light, and it doesn't have to be some big be-all, end-all thing of good person, bad person, the fate of the universe type of thing. Seek knowledge first and decide what you want to keep and what you want to disregard. But first, knowledge. So the question is, are we racist? Yes. Are we prejudiced? Yes. Are we sexist? Yes. Are we ageist? Yes. How did we come to these conclusions? And what do we want to do about them? That's all there is to it. So, I mean, I could just drag this out more and more, I guess. But I think that's the idea that I really want to present. And maybe once I get another person to co-host or guest host, whatever, we'll be able to go back and forth. And it will be, I'll have more to offer you. But for right now, that's what I want to discuss. And this little process of passing on what we've learned not only shapes it shapes households. So we're a world in ourselves, basically. So it shapes people, it shapes households, it shapes localities, communities, countries. It's shaped the world. So it is a self-sustaining thing. The world that we see now is a direct result and descendant of what came yesteryear. What our parents believed, what our grandparents believed. So the idea that racism is not an issue now is to not understand how things work and how things are passed along. It doesn't have to be an issue, but it is an issue just because automatically we just pass on what we are. So you're not going to pass on what you're not. You can't pass on what you don't have. You give them what you have. So the Emancipation Proclamation coming in 1862 or whatever it came was not the end of racism, or it was not the end of that system of thinking. That system of thought was passed on. You can't legislate people's thoughts. Only an individual can regulate their thoughts, basically. And it starts with awareness, being aware. So, and if you actually think about it, 160 years ago is not a very long time. My grandma is 86 years old. So, that's her grandparent, her grandma. So I know my grandma, obviously. Well, maybe not obviously. And I know my mother or whatever. But basically, my point of origin can reach back, we'll say at least 86 years. Because she's my living relative and she's sharing her experiences, thoughts, whatever. Now, her point of origin reaches further back. So, do you understand what I'm saying? She learned from her predecessors, like I learned from my predecessors, like you learned from your predecessors. You don't automatically set about on your own path. You're not you're not reinventing the wheel. You're given a wheel. Now, you can improve that wheel and you can trade that wheel in for a different wheel. But understand you're first and foremost given a wheel. And it is your responsibility to learn the specifics of that wheel instead of to mindlessly go forward. Hopefully you're not having children before you actually are self-aware. And hopefully you're not having children before you actually have mastered yourself. Unfortunately, that's a pipe dream of mine. Most people are as soon as they can. So they haven't figured themselves out, and it's a mental child raising a little child. A literal child. But we're going to stop that. Even if you have a kid right now, even if you have 10 kids right now, this is the beginning of your growing up. And when you grow up, you decide what you want to pass on. And you're going to only pass on the good stuff. And you're going to teach your children to be discerning in what they accept. You're not going to teach them what to think. You're going to teach them how to think. Anyways, all right, so that's all I really wanted to talk about today, which was prejudice, racism, who has it, who doesn't, and how it goes on being acquired and how it goes on being removed. So if you think you're not prejudiced, in all likelihood, you're not self-aware enough. So that doesn't mean automatically whatever your preconceived or first thought is your last thought. You might lock your door when you see a black person walking toward you in your car, or that might be your first thought. That doesn't mean you have to obey that thought. But if you examine why you think that, the more you examine it and the more you're self-aware, you up the chances of that not being your first thought or your first action. It's all about knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the more options you have. The more options you have, the tougher, just the better your whole experience will be. Anyways, I'm looking forward to reading your comments. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. You can tell me topics that you want me to discover or discuss, And if you ever want to collaborate, let's do it. Share my content. Like or dislike my content. Tell me why you like or dislike the content. Whatever. And again, this is going to be a blog, vlog, whatever. So I am not really going to hold myself to being as brief as possible. In fact, it will try and be a laid back and thorough experience so that thoughts can be expressed and digested in a leisure manner, basically. And hopefully this will become a thriving entity, or whatever you want to call it, a community, whatever. But really, I have aspirations and designs for it being a global thing. So this is a family. This is one for all for one type of thing. It might be only people that look like me right now, or people that know me right now, but I got much, much bigger designs. And you're part of the plan. Like it or not, and know it or not, we're in it together. So, like I said, tell me what you wanna, tell me whatever you wanna tell me, and I will see you when I see you. Thanks for watching and listening, and looking forward to doing this again.